Hi, intuitive viewers. Welcome. So I am so excited today. I am going to be talking to Tom Douce. Hi,
Hi, Kim.
Tom. Tom is a spiritual coach in manifestation and helping people to navigate kind of their spiritual journey. He helps with light workers and star seeds, and kind of helps them to kind of navigate their own spiritual path. So thank you, Tom, for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Kim. Thank you for having me on Intuitiview.
You're welcome.
I'm very excited.
Me too. I'm so happy to have you here. And I want to get two elephants out of the room before we start, because I know people are going to right away, they're going to want to know these things. And it's just because you speak with such clarity and wisdom. But how old are you?
26.
I was going to say, you're so young, but you speak with such wisdom and clarity. So right away, they're going to be like, how old is this guy? Because you're an old soul, or clearly you have this inner wisdom that you just have. But and then where are you from? Tell people where you're from.
So I'm from Melbourne, Australia.
Okay.
And funnily enough, we just got out of lockdown last week. I'll probably elaborate on that soon, but we were the longest lockdown city in the world. So you may have heard about Melbourne in the news, perhaps, but that's where I'm from.
You've been released. You've been freed.
We've been set free.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice when you get that, when you get you get to go out and do things again. It's just, so great.
Yes.
So I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that. But I knew right away they'd want to know how old you are, and also where are you from, because you have that accent. So let's dive right in, because you have a YouTube channel, and I kind of found you because I was looking for information on the 5D, and we're going to get to that. But you talk about your own kind of spiritual awakening, and you talk about when it kind of first emerged for you. And I think that you kind of think of the awakening like I do, and other spiritual teachers have talked about it, as like a shift in consciousness. There's something that just shifts, and you're kind of in a different state. So can you kind of talk about that? And it's the story where you're kind of having a mental crisis in the bathroom stall, and which if you've gone to high school, then everybody's had that moment. But this was a really a different kind of experience. So go ahead and tell people about that.
Sure, Kim. I think firstly, the thing that I find with spiritual awakening is it sometimes can be an intimidating word. It was for me, enlightenment, spiritual awakening, and all this kind of stuff. And I think what I'm finding that I really resonate with my journey is to kind of understand that it doesn't have to be intimidating. And ultimately what we're talking about is coming into a place of greater peace, greater love, greater joy, greater wholeness, and basically understanding that we're good enough as we are. That's how I see it, really. People call it, waking up out of the illusion, waking up out of the dream, waking up out of the ego. That never resonated with me. I really find it's coming into the wholeness and fullness of who you are, and recognizing you're enough and feeling safe to be you. And to be honest, sitting here right now, that's not a journey that's complete for me. And I don't know if perhaps we ever get there. Maybe we do. Maybe there's some master. I'm sure there are masters that have arrived, if that's possible. I just see it as a journey of coming more into that integration and peace within yourself. So I have had big experiences, the bathroom stall one being actually one that happened this year. It wasn't back in high school. There were ones kind of just after high school, but you're right. It's an ongoing process, but it does have these bigger experiences. So I suppose if I go back a little bit with my spiritual awakening journey, it sort of began basically in my early 20s. So I wasn't really a spiritual person at all during my teenage years, really much at all. I was into science. I questioned religion. I went through that phase. And I really didn't believe in a God. In fact, I was quite a strong atheist, which sometimes hurts my heart a little. I jokingly say it hurts my heart a little bit now, because I just don't know who that is anymore, that version of me. But it was having said that, I always had this deep curiosity about life, and I was always asking probing questions about why life the way it was and is, and what's my purpose, and why are people living the way they are in society. And I was just questioning everything. I think a lot of it was fueled by teenage angst a little bit, and another part was definitely fueled by a deep curiosity that I don't know where I was sort of born with, this innate curiosity. And eventually it led me to studying philosophy in university in my degree. And so I got this degree in philosophy hoping to answer the questions of life, but it just didn't give me anything. In fact, it made me more in the unknown, more feeling like I now had intellectual knowledge about stuff, but at a soul level, just there was still an emptiness, a complete. It was all cerebral. It hadn't come into my being, and I was still hell bent on finding my purpose, and I was not going to get a normal job, and I have to find my passion, and I was very strong with all these kind of impulses. But eventually it led me to this point, maybe three years ago now, where I was actually in this crummy little apartment with my ex-girlfriend now at the time, working this casual job. I had a degree and I could have kind of gotten a pretty good job and career and everything like that, but I turned my back on that, trying to find answers, trying to find a purpose, and none of it was working. And I just remember sitting on the bed, and just sitting there in a state of really like black hopelessness. And I was going in and out of depression and all this kind of stuff for months, but really, really black kind of feeling and state. And it was at that moment that, for some reason, intuitively, not really in a religious or even spiritual sense at all, but I just said, I have faith. And I was really more saying, I have faith I would make it through, I would break through, I'd find the answers, everything would work out, that type of thing. And so I just started saying, I have faith, I have faith, I have faith. Suddenly, to my surprise, this feeling of love just came, it came from a great depth within me. And it filled into my heart, and it sat there momentarily, and I felt it there. And then in an instant like that, it just exploded. And my sense of self just somehow left this temporary human limited point of view, and it sort of expanded and became universal. And it was just the most ecstatic, beautiful, divine experience I'd ever had, completely out of this world. I had no idea what was happening to me, but I felt like I was plugged back into the very source of existence. And it became this glaringly obvious truth that love is at the core of all of life. It's the purpose behind all of life, and it's what and who we truly are. And it was just this mystical experience that sort of just, it must have been, the divine timing that I needed at that moment, but it sort of came in there, and it sort of changed my entire life from that point of view. And I soaked my t-shirt in tears. It was so profound. And for months after that, just thinking back to the event, thinking back to the goodness and beauty and that exquisite peace and wholeness and relief and love, it was just the most beautiful thing you could possibly imagine, and the most comforting thing, because to me it was like stepping beyond the fourth wall of the human experience and realizing, oh, we're actually okay. Like we really are all okay, and we really are here just temporarily to experience who we are, to celebrate the souls we are, to kind of explore our gifts, to create something really meaningful. But ultimately we return to this space of absolute wholeness and absolute love. So that was an experience. But it was such a strong experience that I had a dissonance. I came back sort of into that experience, and I didn't have the context for it. Nothing had changed in my life. And so it was actually kind of, if anything, it was inspiring in one sense, but also very confusing, overwhelming, and my life was still the way it was. But it kind of then propelled the dark night of the soul period, which goes on and off. There was I was processing things, coming into new information for quite a while, for many years, and also building up my confidence to eventually start my business, which I really want to start my own business. I really want to be my own boss. As I said, from when I was a teenager, I wanted to do something that I was very passionate about. And eventually I sort of was working with these experiences that were happening on and off, gaining this courage within myself, and just stepping into the unknown again and again, until eventually I sort of started my channel. I went traveling to India, I sort of shifted out of relationships. I moved a couple of times, and so much expanded and changed, and lots of inner experiences too. And so it led me to kind of this point where, a few years later now, I'm sort of, I've sort of become very interested in spirituality, and more confident about that what that experience was pointing to. Not arrived by any means. Like, I want to make that very clear. Like, I really believe in authenticity and vulnerability. And I say, like, even in the last few weeks with lockdown, I mean, we were locked down for 6 months, basically full time, until last week, and almost for 2 years for the majority of time. And that I was still struggling a lot with that emotionally, and we're all still human beings.
Yeah.
So it's not like I never like that impression that you become above human experience. I just don't believe that is a good way to put it. I think that we all just want to belong. We're all human. Our experiences are whatever we're going through are real to us in that when we're going through it. And so it's not about necessarily arriving, but it is a very satisfying, expansive journey that I'm on. And now we're here. So that's kind of a sort of an explanation in a nutshell of my spiritual journey, I suppose. Lots of ups and downs for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that initial experience was kind of the catalyst to get you seeking, in a way, kind of searching, what was that? How do I get more of that? Where did that come from? That it sounds like it kind of led you. Yeah, that was the catalyst. It's so interesting. As you were talking, it reminded me so much of Eckhart Tolle.
Yes.
Yeah. It reminded me so much of his experience, because he was went to university and thought all the answers are going to be found there, because he was deeply depressed and had a lot of anxiety and that kind of thing, and went to university, and then was actually on the verge of suicide. He wasn't just depressed, he was going to kill himself. And he had this, what you explained, kind of this overwhelming kind of opening, and he never came back. Like, he's permanently divorced from his ego, which would be so nice, right? In one fell swoop, it just happened. But it reminded me of that kind of overwhelming experience that you really can't, you couldn't ignore it. It was something you couldn't dismiss or think, oh, that was my imagination. It really was deeply felt, in that you felt like you connected with something that was completely different.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Very well said. So well said. Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't had I don't think I was lucky enough to have the Eckhart Tolle permanent ego separation thing. My ego very much came back and was processed, and I had many other of those, like, tight moments where it pops open. That's when you mentioned the bathroom stall one. That was one that I had during lockdown about 5-6 months ago, when another layer came up, and that was an even stronger, like, the pressure built up, and then there was a big release and realization.
Well, and I was going to have you talk about that too, because I think people think it's supposed to be like the Eckhart Tolle thing, where you're awake and now you're just awake, but that isn't how it is, right? Most all of us are kind of drifting back and forth, from completely ego-based into these periods of enlightenment, and kind of pulling ourselves back and forth as life pulls at us in one way, and then our consciousness, or our spirit self, pulls in a different direction. And once you've had that one experience, you're kind of in this sway back and forth, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I love the way you describe things.
Though.
Very, very beautiful way of describing it. Yes, I very much agree with that. And I think if you're particularly more of a sort of sensitive, empathic, heart-centered soul, and you resonate more with that that feeling like you've been a people pleaser, like you're not enough, and your journey's been about stepping into your worth. When you hear about these stories about masters that just get it, and you're meant to be in this state, it can actually make you feel worse about yourself, which is a strange type of ego, where you're feeling bad about yourself for not being enlightened or spiritually there, which is kind of actually perpetuating the cycles of ego that um, that are keeping us in more of those states we don't want to be in. Whereas if we just come from that place of compassion to ourselves and say, no matter how I get there, I will get there. I will arrive more and more. I'm doing an incredible job with life. I trust myself, and I'm deepening my relationship with myself. That, in a way, actually, it sounds like it's perpetuating a separate sense of ego and self, but actually what it does is it soothes that inflammation, which is what ego is, the sense that we're not enough as we are. And for some people, that is the pathway to actually having those bigger awakenings, because we're no longer pressuring ourselves to be something, with enlightenment being the next thing that we have to be, but rather we're just coming back into that wholeness and safety to be who we are. And it's funny in that experience, the dawnings happen, the bigger experiences then happen. You sort of just dissolve into that space because you feel so at one with who you are. So it's an interesting way to put it. So I would say, yeah, it's, some people may get the lucky
Right.
all at once, and then it's permanent. Certainly hasn't been for me. I don't know about you,
Hasn't
Kim.
been for me either. It's, yeah, it's a constant,
Yeah.
it's a constant back and forth. And there is, it's funny you put it that way, because there is a type of surrender that happens right in that moment where you're surrendering to your true self in a way, or your being, rather than this kind of outward temporary person that we are, this person that we are. There's something you're surrendering to, because you're releasing kind of that, your kind of identity, and those preconceived notions, and those, all of that stuff you pick up along the way that, like you said, tells you not good enough, or you don't, all of these things that you have, these impressions you have about yourself, and that others maybe have impressed upon you. And you kind of surrender all that to fall into your being, right? That seat, like the seat of the soul, like Gary Zukos talks about that, how you
Yeah.
kind of surrender into that being. It's that, do you feel that way? It is like a type of surrendering where you're letting go, really, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Very well said. It's like, it's the recognition that I don't have to carry the burdens of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually, the more I let go and let God move through, the more I can effortlessly enjoy what was only here to be enjoyed, not struggled with and battled with. And the interesting thing, and this is where manifestation comes in, which is sometimes spiritual teachings leave this part out, but I think it's really important, is that the more that you surrender to that space, you're not actually losing control, because there's only free will, in the sense that ultimately we're all one with the source. So the source's creation is its free will. It freely wants to be you. You're its greatest
Right.
gift, in a sense. You're the miracle of the source in form. You're the divine expressing itself through the gift that you are. So actually, surrender really is just to say, uh, please carry the burdens that were never mine to carry, and let me be free to have the free will of the source move through me, to raise me to the highest frequency and most aligned state of being that I was always meant to embody, so that my life can effortlessly reflect that back to me more and more and more, so I can get to know myself as the most beautiful, divine, loving, awe-inspiring being I am, which is the truth of who I would always have been. So it's actually, the more that you surrender or let go, it is really the burdens of having to control life that you're letting go, and you allow life to then move through you, and you're at a high frequency, which actually creates your best life, because it's a mirror. The frequency that you are within, reverberates and echoes out, and informs the world on what to show up and what to reflect back to you, because at the end of the day, it's just a big dance of energy, and we're connected in that way. I actually was seeing some of your videos, and I love how it's a really great example where you get on there and you give your value, you give your energy, and then people give you those comments, or they give a donation, and it's a perfect example of that the energy you're radiating out to the world is just then received back. And that's kind of what we're learning. That's now we're starting to move into what the 5D is about, if we end up talking about that shift. It's more of that effortless living where we just, as you said, and as Gary Zukov, what is it, Zukov?
Zukov,
I forget
yeah.
how, Zukov, yeah. I
I think
haven't read
that's
Seed of
right.
the Soul. I have it on my Audible, and I started it.
Yeah,
I love his
yeah,
voice. I've never
yeah,
finished it. But yeah, to come back and Seed of the Soul, that's really
right,
what that is about, that surrender
right.
process.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And so I have a question for you, but I feel like it's just going to be in a kind of opinion, your own opinion, because I don't know if there's an answer to this. But when I hear you talk about these things, and when I've heard others talk about this kind of this like you said, kind of letting go of burdens and kind of just being in your being, we're really like that as kids, right? I mean, before all of this stuff, kind of when we're into kind of being able to communicate and you know, we're in the world fully, but all of that stuff hasn't been put on us yet. So we just go out and play and have fun. And if you've not had a traumatic childhood, this is if you've had just a childhood filled with play and fun, and you don't have those burdens yet. You don't have the. I feel like my kind of ego started to really get solid was when I started school, because when you start school, you start to, you know, interact with the world more, and you start to hear what people really think of you. It's not your parents anymore telling you how wonderful you are.
Yeah.
It's everybody else and all these other things. And then you're worried about school, and you don't like this teacher, and they, you know, all of this stuff gets put on you. But do you think there is an age kind of where we start to kind of pull away and have that stuff placed on us? Or do you think a lot of things are on us from the very beginning through parent conditioning and all that stuff? What do you think about that? Or do you think there's an age that it's like, oh yeah, your ego's fully there by then? I
It's a
don't
very interesting question.
know.
It's a very interesting question. What I would say is that whenever and however it happens, it's going to happen, because that's where we're at in our human evolution.
Yeah.
It's no one's fault to have that ego eventually form. I think it's a mix of all those factors. It can be yeah, a bit of it all. I think, and I don't know if there's
Right.
any particular age per se, but it definitely, as I said, it's going to happen in one way or another. Even if you have the best childhood ever, and you're really, as you say, come from quite an unconditionally loving, supportive environment,
Right.
it's the very nature of being separate from the source that
Right.
builds that egoic conditioning. I call the ego really just the soul, the identity of a soul that's forgotten it's a soul. So you come into this life, you naturally come in forgetting that you're a soul,
I love
and
that. Yeah.
you come from a higher source. So when you have that, you have that pain of separation, and that becomes that's a space of inflammation, which is what all that the ego really is. It's just thoughts or psychic patterns or and emotional patterns
Right.
stemming from that inflammatory state of a soul that's still remembering what it is. Yeah.
Well, and you're right, because those layers can come in different ways. And I think even knowing, like, I'm female, I'm an American, I'm, you know, I'm the youngest in my family, all of these things, that creates the separation, right? That's my identity, right? My human identity. So that starts the separation, right? Just even knowing that
Yeah.
stuff and identifying with that, that's part of the separation, right? From
Yes.
source.
Yeah, it's getting called your name. Probably
Mhm.
looking up with baby eyes, people saying, you're Kim, you're Kim. You start going,
Yeah.
who me? This pure innocent awareness. Oh, I guess I'm
Right.
not. I'm this separate
It-
being. Yeah.
yeah,
It's so many complex factors, as you
exactly. It
said.
is.
Yeah.
It's layered. It's very layered. Yeah, exactly. So, Tom, I wanted you to kind of go through your explanation for people of the 3D, 4D, 5D, what that is. We were saying, like, the 5D can be called a lot of things. I think, you know, like Eckhart Tolle talks about the new earth, but I think that he subscribes to kind of what you subscribe to, and what I do as well, is that the new earth, I think some people think it's going to be like one earth here and one earth here. They're two earths, one old one and
Yeah.
one new one. But I feel like it, and I think of it more as, or I subscribe to, I guess, the idea that it's going to be individuals shifting in consciousness, shifting into remembering they're a soul. And it's going to be one by one. And each of us kind of leading other people or being example to other people. And that's ultimately how the shift will take place. Do I have that correct, and how you think of it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that. You do hear a lot about this shift and there being two earths, and some people aren't going to make it. Some people are going to stay in ego and
Right,
all of this stuff,
right.
and other people are going to make it to this heavenly place and all that stuff. And I think of it more in the sense that I think it really resonates with us more when we say, no matter what I do, no matter how late to the party I am, no matter
Mhm.
how many mistakes I make along the way, I am destined to enter into this more beautiful space, no matter what, because there's a magnet within us all that's pulling us into the new earth, which is that awakening and resting back into our soul, the very source of all of life, that love that we all are seeking. It's within us like a magnet, so it's going to pull
Right.
every, no matter how it happens or when it happens for each of us. It's going to happen no matter what. So you can't miss it. You can't fail it. You will make that shift. And so ultimately, yeah, I believe we will all make that shift into, one by one, bit by bit, we will all make this shift into the new earth, or the new 5D state of consciousness, which I don't think we've explained what that is yet. The
I
people are
was
probably
going to say
wondering what are they talking
that's what
about.
you're
It's
going
the
to do. That's
earth's,
what you're going to do right now. You're going to explain the
yeah,
3D, 4D, 5D, and it's so great on your video because you've got a whiteboard there. And you're explaining
yeah.
everything, and I think you make it so clear. I've never heard it explained better and more, just with more clarity. So, yeah, please explain the 3D, 4D, 5D,
Yeah,
and what each one is, what it's like to be within each one.
yeah. So the 3D basically just it's describing state of consciousness or state of being that we're in. And so there's different labels. Some say 3D, third dimension, fifth dimension, fourth dimension. Some say density, third density, fourth density.
Mhm.
We'll go with dimension today, but there's just to let people know there are through a few different types of words to describe what this shift is, but they're just words. Really, to simplify it down, we've coined what we're in right now as most of humanity are in the state of 3D consciousness, or the third dimension of consciousness, and that, of course, is the state of consciousness prevalent in ego. The ego is prevalent and ubiquitous, and so that's that sense of separation from the source, and all the patterns of fear, of violence, of corruption, all the worst aspects, if we want to judge it, not worse absolutely, but none of us like those aspects of humanity. We see what's happening around the world, we wonder why it's happening. Well, really, it all comes back to that sense of ego and separation from the source, that manifests in all these patterns. And so we've been like that for thousands of years, haven't we? As the ego came in, the ego was the next step in our evolutionary journey. When the ego came about, this sense of self-awareness and yet still separate existence, seemingly so, that's where we entered into the third dimension. It's kind of like a phase. So perhaps cavemen before it, without egos, they were more kind of like animals in the present moment, not really aware, but not really in
Right.
friction with life, not really, just kind of going about it. But when we became aware, oh, I exist, and we developed the ego, but we hadn't remembered our divine origins, that's when we get stuck in the third dimension temporarily, where we're kind of resisting life, controlling life in fear, and that's where all these aspects of humanity arise. The good news is, in around 2012, I don't know if
Mhm.
the date's exactly accurate, but very, very recently, we began starting the evolutionary process into the next level for humanity, and that's the fifth dimension, fifth dimensional consciousness. I don't know why, again, it's called 5D, or why it wouldn't just go 3D to 4D. The 4D
Right,
is
right.
described as the in-between phase. Yeah, the 4D is more of the in-between, as you're kind of somewhat in 3D and
Right.
somewhat in 5D, and you're kind of going back between them. That's really all I see 4D. It's like a gateway phase. But 5D is where we remember, oh, I'm not just this separate being who should be afraid, who's living in this big, scary universe, and there's limited resources, and I'm powerless, and I'm basically afraid, and all these patterns coming out. But rather, we come to that space of healing, that awakening, that connection to that inner dimension within us, and we start remembering who we truly are, and that those true states of being start flooding into us, like what we've been talking about, that love, that joy, that peace. that goodness, that beauty, all of that starts shining into us, and it fills us with that knowledge beyond the level of mind of who we truly are. And as that happens, it fills us up, and it closes that sense of separation into a space of healing and alignment. And that's when we start entering more and more into the fifth dimension, where we remember, oh, we're actually one with everything. We're eternal, divine, spiritual beings. We can let go of fear. We can welcome in love. We are very powerful. We can create our realities. We can manifest things. We can enjoy life, and we can welcome in the source and the divine to kind of guide our life and move through us, and we can more surrender. So it's like we return back to being animals, but we also have the beauty of awareness of that process as well. So it's the best of both worlds. That's what the fifth dimension is about. I always say imagine being like a puppy dog. The fifth dimension is like being a puppy dog, but you're aware that you're a puppy dog. I mean, how good is that, right? It's
Right.
like, I'm here, everything's amazing, I'm present, I'm alive, everything's divine, and I'm aware that's the case. That's what we're moving into in a more stable, permanent way, believe it or not. Now, having said that, it's going to take a fair while. I believe that if you're watching this video, you have an absolute potential to experience this amazing radiant state in this lifetime. Otherwise, you wouldn't be aware of this. You wouldn't have kind of manifested this information in. If you're watching this far in, a part of your soul's very interested in waking up to that, because, as I said, that magnet's pulling you into that next evolutionary part of your soul's journey. Yeah, so it's a very exciting thing that can happen for many people in this lifetime. For all of humanity, I think it's going to take quite a while. Maybe
well, and I've heard you say 100 years, but I hope you're wrong.
Yeah, I think, yeah, possibly. I mean, who knows? It could be a lot quicker, it could be slower. We don't really need to know, but it could be quite a while longer. 100 years, few hundred years, who knows? But the beauty is that when you enter into that state, the whole state of the world, from your point of view, changes. And as I said, imagine a puppy dog seeing the world. A puppy dog doesn't see a big mess of a world that needs fixing and is overwhelmed with. It just sees life as it is. And so when you enter into that state, you don't need the world to catch up, because the way you see it is more through that lens of perfection, which is how the source sees life, because you're becoming more divine like that. Yeah.
And do you find that, because I found that sometimes people get, when you explain this state of being, because there are so many problems in the world, there's so much going on, that people say, well, that's just sticking your head in the sand because you're just worrying about you. I kind of, and I want to get your answer to that. Mine is always that when you're in a different state of consciousness, when you're in that kind of, whatever you want to call it, the shift, a higher state of consciousness, whatever you do is infused with that. So anything you do in that state is that much more powerful. When you're going it from the ego state, like if I'm angry and pissed off at the world and everything sucks and everybody's stupid, and I give money to something through that state, it carries an energy. But if I give money when I feel peaceful and calm and loving and kind and compassionate, when I give money, same organization, I'm giving the same money, it's infused with that energy. Do you see it that way?
Yes, yeah, definitely. The power of our intention and the state of being we're coming from reverberates out and has an impact. Absolutely. And that's why we're so powerful. What we intend to experience with our life, if we intend to experience more love, more joy, more peace, more abundance, all these things, we intend that will very, very highly likely become true. So when we also give and contribute to the world, which doesn't disappear when you enter in this state. In fact, it becomes even more there, because you actually what seems like sticking. I totally understand. It seems like you're living in a fairy tale world, sticking your head in the sand. I totally understand how it seems that way. It very much seems like that way, and because there is a lot of suffering, and we definitely want to solve that at a human level for sure. But I'd say is actually you're taking your head out of the sand. You're taking your head out of the sand. That's what this is about. You're coming up into life, and you're actually
Right.
much more able to help in a powerful way, and contribute energetically with your actions, with your intentions, with your whole way of life, in the most powerful way when you enter into this higher state. So it's not like you kind of have this higher beautiful state and then just kind of leave the world. No, the impulse is to give, because you're starting to radiate love. You're becoming, I mean, that's what the source is. It's just the radiation of love, the giving of love, the being of love. When you become more and more attuned with that energy within you, you can't turn off the impulse to give and to help in any way you can, because that's all that ultimately the source is. It's just that love radiating out infinitely. So you actually allow that to come through you, and you do it in a more conscious way, and you still have absolute compassion for the human suffering in the world, and you want to help that because you recognize, and this is why I said it's good to honor the human in us all, because absolutely, even though you may feel love, joy, peace, and you're remembering these divine truths, and that's a beautiful thing, it's not like you see someone in the street and go, oh, they're in an illusion, just why can't they realize this, or I can just walk by them. And your heart goes out. You
Right.
have wells of compassion, and you may give in that moment. You may feel inspired to give, or you may think of solutions to solve a certain problem, or whatever your soul is calling you to do. But you're constantly in that space of giving, and more of a selfless way of life. So
Yeah.
you don't, yeah,
I love that.
you don't lose the sense of suffering in the world or the problems of the world. You're able to see it from a more integrated space, and help in a more powerful, conscious way that resonates with you. That's what I'd say is more of how it is.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really well said, Tom. And I wasn't going to ask you this, but now I'm curious about, because you talk about manifesting when you're in a higher state. How does that relate to manifesting?
Yeah.
Is it easier to manifest from? I would imagine it is easier to manifest from that place, but why is it? Why is that? What part
Yeah.
does it play?
It's manifesting can be confusing, because in one sense it's like surrender to God, let God, or let the source look after your
Right,
life for you,
right.
and so then it's like, well, I can create things. It doesn't make any sense, does it? See, when you enter into higher states, or you come home into yourself, everything's just right. And it's right not in a logical sense, it's right at the level of the soul. And so what that means is, just like a puppy dog goes to the park, it doesn't wonder, how am I going to play? Who should I be? What should I do? How am I going to create an amazing time at this park? It's too busy enjoying the process of living. And
Right.
that's what manifestation is. It's just this spontaneous sense of, I could do this, and this is exciting me, and it just makes sense, and there's no need to question it, because you're turning back to that childlike
Right.
space of wonder and innocence. So it was funny how you mentioned that earlier. Most of us hopefully had some experience of that when we were young, especially when we were just free being us. And we seem to create a whole lot of amazing stuff. That's how
Right.
manifestation works. It's just that you're tapped back into the flow of life, and you're just letting it guide you, or you're kind of simultaneously guiding it in this just way that can't be explained but makes sense when you're being it. Um, I'm not sure if it's a hard thing to explain.
No,
It's
no,
ultimately, it's a state of being.
that's perfect. Because I just wondered what that, why it's so important to be in that state when you manifest, because it is manifesting. I almost wish there was a different word for it, because it sounds like magic, and it's not really. It's a process, and it just because you begin to, because I think people think that, not everybody, but my when I first heard about manifesting, or when like The Secret came out, it was like you just put things on a board and then you have it. That's how it was
Yeah.
explained. It was like you just do this one thing, or you just say, I want this, and then it just happens. But it's kind of a it's a process, and it yeah, I just think even that word is like, oh, it's just magic, but it's really not. It is our kind of our natural state, right, to be creative beings, and to create what's around us. We do it all the time, right?
Yes, definitely. And maybe one day we'll be able to, in the fifth dimension, maybe in
Right.
1,000 years from now, we just sit there, we imagine something, and it just pops up. I have
Right.
no doubt that might be possible at certain levels, and we hear, Abraham Hicks as a famous
Right.
example of Esther Hicks channeling Abraham as a very
Mhm.
famous example. And I wonder what Abraham, that being, what level of or dimension they're at. Apparently they're even way higher than the fifth. But I think from what I understand is that we actually are that powerful. We're one eventually, millions, thousands, 100,000 years from now, in our evolutionary state, we can just sit there, imagine something, and it appears out of thin air, like in a dream.
Mhm.
Apparently, I believe that would be possible eventually. I mean, I don't know for sure. I'm open to that. Right now, it's not the case that you get in that state of being, and then you do, in a way, like kind of common sense things from that. Like you take actions, you imagine, you think positive affirmations about it, you make plans, but you're doing it hopefully more and more from a spirit of trust and knowing that you can have what you want, that it is possible, that it's not really down to a sense of lack or competition. That's more 3D, like I need to outcompete people,
Mhm.
but rather the sense that no, I can have this, and if I really truly want it, and I can align that state of being, and I can take the actions, and I can flow with life in this way, and just do everything one moment at a time in the most common sense way. At the end of the day,
Right.
it will that probability will manifest. That reality will start coming true around you, and that's really what manifestation is. It's not really, wouldn't say magical, but it can be, I suppose, somewhat joyful and dreamlike in the sense that it opens up possibilities. Because
Right.
ultimately, what we really believe is true for us, and what we really act on from that space of inspiration and knowing that it's right for us, is what we want. If we really sustain that frequency and take actions in that direction, it just starts coming true. It starts coming true more and more, and as it comes more and more true, we believe it more and more, we move towards it more and more, and ultimately that choice, that probability, that reality we choose as a soul can be manifested. That's really how I would describe it. But I haven't
Right.
had this. I've had the secret style, like visualize something maybe for like small things. Like I remember when I was testing it out, I wanted to see a golf ball. I was like, the most random thing, I'm going to see a golf ball. I didn't live around any golf parks or anything like that. And I just saw myself holding this golf ball because I was like a small thing, and I was like, I'm not going to take any action around this. And then I was playing with my ex-girlfriend's dog. We're at this park, and I was like running, and I was hiding behind this kind of like shelter on the side of this oval, this little bit where the players kind of gather and sit under one of those
Mhm.
benches. And I just sort of was hiding from her, and I just look at my feet, and there's a golf ball there. So I was like, "Oh, what?" And things like that. It is quite
I did
incredible.
it.
I think that you see, like, imagine a car park, and all of a sudden you may get a higher chance of you just get the best car space. Maybe for little things you can kind of have that secret style, just see it and it's just there. Bigger things, I feel like it's more of a
Yeah.
holistic, putting all aspects of your being into it over time, and it can show up with elements of magic and synchronicity and
Right.
divine kind of alignment along the way too, but also practical action as well. Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I could just keep talking to you, but what do you consider yourself, Tom? Do you consider yourself a light worker, star seed? Do you have a place where you think you fall into?
I don't really know. I mean, for sure, like I definitely resonate if people with search, five signs, you're a light worker, five signs, you're a star
Mhm.
seed. You hear all
Yeah.
these things, and all the traits really resonate with you. Your five signs are an
Yeah.
old soul. They all really resonate with
Yeah.
me. Um, so I say that those terms really resonate with me,
Yeah.
and they certainly describe a lot of my experience.
Mhm.
So I tend to say, yeah, why not? Why not
Oh,
say I'm a light
yeah, all of those
worker?
things. Well,
But
good.
who
So,
really knows?
so
Yeah.
Tom, where can people find you, and tell people where they can find your services and the different things you do, and yeah,
Yeah.
let people know.
So I've got a YouTube channel where I upload kind of spiritual manifestation content pretty regularly, and that's just my name. If you search that, Tom Douce, I'm sure you'll provide a link to
Yes.
that or
Yeah.
something like that. So
Everything will
it's
be in there.
easy.
Everything will be there.
Yeah. So I don't have to spell it out or anything like that. So that's
Yeah.
my YouTube channel is the main one, and then I have my website, which is just my name, tomdouce.com, and did you say services I offer as well? Services I do.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I can't remember what you said, but yes, that's my
Yeah.
kind of content wise. And then yeah, I do spiritual coaching, life coaching, guidance and sessions and things like that, and work with a number of beautiful clients on their spiritual journey, how to manifest things, how to let go of blocks, heal, and all this kind of stuff around the things we've spoken about. So that information all is at my website if you want to explore more kind of intimate working with me in that way. But I'd say those are the best two links.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tom, for coming on. This has been
You're
so
welcome,
fun.
Kim.
I mean, I
It
could
really
talk about
has.
this stuff forever. It's my favorite thing to do. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I can really feel that passion in you. It's been such a wonderful, wonderful chat. Thank you so much for having me on, Kim.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you, intuitive viewers. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.